You got it.
Okay.
It came up on the screen.
Or the transcript.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Looking good. Thank you. This is the DPSST Private Security Entity Rules Advisory Committee, also known as a work group. It's July 23rd, 2026. It's 2:00. Staff are here at DPSST. And then we're having a hybrid meeting, so many of our members are attending remotely. I'm going to start with a public meeting announcement. And that is, this is a public meeting subject to public meeting law. This meeting is being digitally recorded and will be posted on the DPSST YouTube page. Discussion of issues will only be conducted by work group members and DPSST staff. Please be mindful of comments and side conversations. So the first thing we want to do is welcome all of you as members of the work group and have an opportunity for introductions of you as work group members to each other, as well as staff members to you all. So I'd like to start with the work group members, and I just have it, I'll just call out names based on the agenda list. And if you could just tell us who you are, who you're representing, and maybe a little bit of a brief one or two things about your private security experience. So the first person on the agenda is Zach.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, DPSST, for the opportunity to be part of this work group. I've been in the industry since 2012. The entire time I've been with Premier Security. Started out as a security officer, worked my way up into an account manager position, operations manager from there, and I'm currently the VP. And so I've been running Premier Security since 2020 since then. So nice to meet you all. And again, thanks for having me on the board.
Thank you. Jason.
Hi, everybody. Jason Bledsoe. I work for Foresight Security Consulting. I've been with the company just since late last year. Security. I come out of the law enforcement world. I retired after 28 years with the Oregon State Police, where I had a ton of management experience. And so Foresight brought me on as their senior manager. Foresight doesn't do any uniform security. We're just in the plainclothes executive protection business. And then we do a lot of threat intelligence.
Thank you very
I was
much.
on my way down, but a traffic accident or car fire had other plans. So sorry, I'm not there. I had hoped to be.
No problem. Thank you. Raul.
Good afternoon. My name is Raul. I work for Rapid Response Monitoring. I have been with the security industry since 2004. Going on 22 years of experience with the security industry and what is alarm monitoring and everything security. More than happy to be here. I also was in the board of policy for 4 years before, so it was really nice working with all of you guys as well. And I'm here to contribute as needed. So thank you for having me. And again, nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Tom.
Tom Heft, I own CY Security. I've been doing security for, I don't know, 20 plus years.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello, I'm Kai Pang with Coast to Coast Event Services. I've been in this manager role the last 5 years or so, and I've been involved with, we do primarily event security, and I've been involved with different event services in the last 15 years or so, dabbling between security and the other things we got going on. And I thank you guys for allowing me to participate here today.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Hello, yes, thank you DPSST for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. My name is Jeremy Simmer. I do research and policy work for Service Employees SCIU Local 49. We represent about 16,000 workers in Oregon and Southwest Washington. About 1,500 of those are security officers who have been members of our union since, well, for about a decade or so, I want to say. And yeah, I participated in the rulemaking group when this law was first passed, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here again and to work with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. Yes, we have Jeremy and Tom are rejoining us from the original work group that helped formulate the first set of rules for the private security entity licensing program. What I haven't said yet is my name is Jennifer Howell. I am DPSST's Legislative and Administrative Rules Coordinator. I'll be a facilitator, but it's a very team effort with all of our staff, which we will go around and introduce. I'll just start here to my left.
I'm Michael Holsapple. I'm the compliance investigator for DPSST for the private security entity section.
I'm Aiden Lewis. I am DPSIC staff. I work with issuing certifications for security licenses.
My name is Marie Atwood. I'm the professional standards director, so I oversee both the criminal justice team and the private professionals team.
And I'm Susie Herring. I'm the program manager for the private professional certification and licensing program.
Krista?
And I'm Carissa White. I am a compliance investigator with the program. I've been around with the program since about 2013. So Susie invites me to these things. So here I am.
Thank you. All right. I have several just kind of overview of process and information, just so you know a little bit more about what a rules advisory committee or work group is and does. And then we'll dive into some of the meeting material that you received with your memo and the draft rule changes. So with that, public meetings. This is a public meeting. We record our public meetings. They, as a work group, as a rules advisory committee, it's now going to be part of our rulemaking record. So we'll be able to look back on our minutes from these meetings to help inform the process that we've followed. So all of our materials are subject to public records requests, and this includes emails, which is why we don't want to have conversations by email, but we will communicate to you by sending you meeting invitations, and we will send you meeting materials, but we will avoid things that result in conversations about the topics that you're covering within your meetings. Those will be reserved for the meeting times themselves. We will record after the meeting. We'll post it to our YouTube page so that members of the public who would not have been able to attend in person could also watch the meeting and the discussion. We will have written minutes as well. We will be posting the agendas, the meeting materials, and the written minutes to our website. Members should not have conversations about workgroup topics outside of the meetings. And as I mentioned, that includes email conversations. As far as meeting etiquette goes, please try to state your name for the record, not to be formal, but just to help everyone understand who is speaking. It will make it easier for those of you online to know who's speaking in the room, and vice versa for us in the room to know who is queued up and speaking on the screen. Please be respectful of time and each other so that everyone gets a chance to contribute. Do not have side conversations. And be respectful of all views. Workgroup procedural things. When we meet, we're looking for at least a majority of the workgroup members to be available to attend so that we can conduct the meeting. Luckily for this group, we were able to schedule out several meetings so that you all have plenty of time to have them on your calendar. That's we hope will be very helpful. When we move forward with recommendations, it's going to be based on a consensus, so a majority of the group supporting the discussion and the concept that would go forward. Discussions and outcomes should reflect statewide impacts and not focus on individual benefits. So as members, you are encouraged to use your individual business experience to inform the discussion, as it provides an important insight into how the rules affect different types of entities and how they interact with your daily life. But at the same time, please remember that final recommendations need to be what's best for the state as a statewide program. In between meetings, we'll continue to communicate with you via email to give you the next meeting's updates and information. what is rulemaking and a rulemaking process? The steps from a work group to a permanent rule change. So we're going to have a discussion on some draft administrative rule changes. And once we've had a chance to go through all of those with you, we'll be able to take your feedback and information and make additional changes. And then we'll take them to the Board on Public Safety Standards and Training for review and approval. Once they review and approve, we would submit them as official proposed administrative rule changes through the Secretary of State. And that creates a public comment process where we announce that the rule is open for public comments and we collect those public comments. Then we have to determine whether or not we received any comments. And if we received comments, do they require us to make additional changes? Sometimes we're able to manage those processes and decisions internally. Sometimes we have to call the work group back and say, we want to dive a little bit further into this one specific topic. But once we've made it through public comment and made any adjustments that are needed, we may or may not have to have a secondary approval by the board, but at the end of the timeline, there's a time when we file the changes as final permanent rule changes. Right now, if we were to map out a timeline, we would hope to present the proposed rule changes to the October board, have public comment after that, and hopefully adopt the rules permanently by January 1st. That's it if everything happens perfectly timeline. Not everything always happens perfectly. That is just a broad procedural overview of the public meetings and the rulemaking process. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Seeing and hearing none at this moment, let's take a quick look at why we're here today. The purpose of this work group is to review the current administrative rules for the private security entity licensing program. These rules are found in Oregon Administrative Rule Chapter 259, Division 59, and were originally adopted to implement this licensing requirement that took effect January 1st of 2024. DPSST amended two of the rules in 2025 based on changes to the definition of a private security entity as a result of the passage of Senate Bill 300. So those were just technical adjustments. But overall, these rules have now been in place for approximately 2 years, and the program is currently processing its second license renewal cycle. Through implementation and administration of the entity licensing program, DPSST has identified program and rule changes that would improve processing, efficiency, enforcement, and overall clarity, hopefully for private security entities and the public, as well as for internal processes. So to facilitate that review, we started with a draft rule change to bring forward to you for you to consider. We also have a list of specific discussion points and talking points that are interwoven within those rule changes. But we want to invite you to provide your feedback and identify or comment on, give us individual questions, concerns, or discussion topics as we walk through the whole process. And my idea is just we're going to pick up attachment A, which is the draft rule changes, and start by walking through each individual rule. I want it to be conversational, and as you have questions, as you have additional feedback, we just want to hear that as we go along. Is there anything else I can tell you before we get started? Any questions? All right. So attachment A provides each of the administrative rules. And as we start, the first rule is a definitions rule. 259.059.0010 definitions provides definitions for the interpretation and application of all of the administrative rules for the private security entity licensing program. The definitions in this rule supplement additional definitions that were found in statute. So when we went through, you'll see this change frequently throughout the whole rule set, changing the term licensure into just a simpler reference of a license or licensing. And it's just a semantical change, a language preference, hopefully just to make it easier to read. But there's a secondary change there for entity representative. And with that, we're just hoping to, let's see, it says amending the definition of an entity representative based on the requirement found in Rule 590030. So we just wanted to provide additional clarification as to how that, who the entity representative is. I wanted to pause for questions about any of the other definitions or any questions or concerns about the changes that were proposed there.
Raul, for the record, the first changes you proposed to change on the vocabulary is fine with me, at least in that part.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if everybody else will agree, but I think that makes sense.
Thank you. Like I said, we'll see that on almost every rule. So, yeah.
There's a change to 13 qualified designee, removing governmental entity based on Senate Bill 300.
Thank you. So Michael was pointing out the changes to 13, which didn't make it into my list in the memo of changes, so I apologize for that. But yes, so as the definition of private security entity changed, we found that governmental entities were no longer going to fall underneath that definition of a private security entity. So that is striking governmental from that list of individuals who would qualify for having a qualified designee in place of the principal owner or partner. So we may reference back to the definitions if there are questions about other rules and how things apply as we go through the entire rule set. And that is absolutely okay to do, to bounce from rule to rule if we have to go back and forth to complete our discussions. I'll go ahead and turn to page 4, which is the next one. I'll just do the last rule, 20. Rule number 20, private security entity license required. This rule identifies the licensing requirements, clarifies which persons are not required to obtain a private security entity license. You'll see that licensing change there at the beginning, and then we've made some additional edits there in C and D. So here we are looking to have the language in D match the definition of a private security entity by replacing employ with the phrase for an agreed remuneration or rate of pay, recruit, solicit, supply, or employ. Just trying to make the language match throughout the entire set.
I have a question about C, about the executive manager. The section. Sorry, no, I think I'm thinking of a different section. The part I was interested in is lined out here. So never mind. I withdraw my comment.
Okay. We can go back at any time. And just for clarification, 4 is outlining those who don't need to have a license. If anyone had any questions or concerns on how that interpretation is applied.
Raul, for the record, I just have a question about this. It might fall into the same area or not. So as alarm monitors, we are required to have everybody getting a certification. Now we're monitoring alarms for residences, private businesses, government establishments, and all of that. However, what is the difference between a technician installing an alarm system? They are not required to have certifications, and they are entering the businesses. They know the layout, they know the system. So is there any difference, or can we make a better difference into that?
There's an exemption for installation in the statute. Only alarm monitors are required for the certification. If they just do installation or provide equipment of that, they meet the definition of an exemption in the statute. I believe it's in 850.
Okay.
And so ultimately, Raul, that was a legislative choice whenever the certification and licensing requirements for private security providers were adopted way back when. That was a legislative choice as to who would be regulated under that program, and they have not to date been added to a regulatory program as technicians.
Understood. I just believe, in a way that will solve some of the issues as well with budgeting, because they're installers, and I mean, we are following all the rules. But I understand what you mean. Thank you.
Sure, of course. Okay. I'll move us on to the next rule. Rule 30, the entity representative required, entity representative responsibilities. So this rule is requiring that all private security entities designate an entity representative, and that's going to be the person who DPSST is going to be in contact with regarding the application for the license. And section 2 there, the entity representative must be the principal owner or the principal partner who exercises operational control over the entity or a qualified designee. And we have that definition of qualified designee in the definitions. And then the definition that we had previously amended for entity representative reinforces that same requirement, identifying who can be an entity representative. It's just that principal owner, principal partner, or the qualified designee. So the changes here in section 3, we're just showing those changes with the terminology of licensure, and that is throughout the rest of the rule there, just those technical changes. But we do want to provide space for you to ask any questions about the rule or how it's implied or interpreted. Next rule is Rule 40. The licensing period. So again, at the top, you just see the change for the terminology of licensure. The current licensing period is a 1-year license. We issue the license for July 1st, and it expires June 30th of each year. And the applicant needs to reapply if they're continuing to operate as a private security entity. Currently, we would open that up for folks to submit their applications, and they would need to renew by June 30th. Here you'll see a shift, a proposed shift in the time period for that 1-year license. So we propose shifting the July 1st to June 30th licensing period to April 1st through March 31st of each year. And we'd like to do that to recognize that there is a cycle for private security entities in the business year. And this would move the licensing process forward in the year so that it's all taken care of before you enter a busy season over spring and summer and fall activities. And so that was the idea behind shifting that timeline forward. So instead of requiring businesses to do all of the application requirements in the middle of or the beginning of summer when your businesses are picking up, we wanted to move that forward within the year. Kind of questions or discussion?
I can provide some historical on that.
You wanna-
The initial date range from July 1 to June 30th was established because that was in concert with the state fiscal cycle. But what we found is implementation and security has been a nightmare because it's right in the middle of the event season when everybody's at their busiest point. So the goal of this is to move it to where licensing can get done and also affect tax compliance. Because currently the tax compliance needs to be issued in the year of the license versus if we were to move it forward, we would change the tax compliance to be from the prior year. In order to get that, because that is one of the biggest hurdles that we're running into with licensing is being able to get tax compliance from the Department of Revenue in a reasonable amount of time. So we're trying to address those issues together.
We were hoping that you all would be able to flag any issues or concerns with making a shift like that. We do have some identified considerations. I wanted to hear from you all first. Go ahead, Tom.
I'll speak up. Zach from Premier. I was just going to say, from a business perspective, I don't really think the date has much impact on our end. My one question with the tax compliance is, do taxes need to be filed before that tax compliance certificate gets issued? I don't know if you guys are aware of that or not.
The tax compliance currently is required within the year of the license. So the license start July of 2026. You would have to have tax compliant issued by the Department of Revenue in 2026. Taxes are filed, they're due by April 15th of each year. Moving this to April would mean that the tax compliance we would accept would be from the prior year. So it would be,
Gotcha,
so say in 2027, it would be issued by the Department of Revenue in 2026, and it would be viable for the April license in 27. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate the clarification on that.
Hands go up from Tom and Jason, so we'll start with Tom.
So Michael just answered the one question I was going to have. If we move it to April 1st, then that's going to have to be the prior year's tax compliance. What does everybody consider about moving it in like October? Then we're in the fall the same year. Instead of moving it back per se, let's move it the opposite way.
Answer that. So the implementation of that would be difficult because current licenses go to the end of June. If we move it forward to the end of March, all we would need to do is prorate the new renewal period. So we would make the renewal period of the shorter year less based on the number of months. If we extend it beyond that, we would do another 2 or 3 month renewal, and then the year it's easier to move forward than it is to move back.
Okay.
Jason, did you still have questions?
No, I had the same question as Zach, and I guess I was going to say, what's the downside? But it sounds like you have a list, so I'll be patient. It doesn't impact us either. We're either busy or slow all year long. It isn't really influenced by the summer season for us, just for what it's worth.
Okay, thank you. Raul, your hand was next.
Yes, I was just thinking, have you guys checked if this will increase late renewals or application deficiencies by moving the date like that? And what will you do if that happens?
Thanks, Raul. So we have kind of an outline of what the timeline would look like in the memo. So currently licensed entities would expire on June 30th. If this went into effect in January and we have this new licensure renewal that happens by April 1st, we would start collecting the applications for renewal in February for that March renewal. So everyone who's currently licensed would still expire June 30th. We would just be asking for that renewal to occur earlier in the process. And because we would be making a significant change, we'd be doing a lot of outreach on that. And then it ends up prorating the next period, because the first, you're still licensed for, you still already paid for your license for April, May, and June of 27. So it would be the next month's amount. Would it increase late renewals? I don't know that we could predict that. We would hope to head it off with that education and outreach in advance of the change.
I don't think we would do the renewal early to start. What we would do is this next year would be 27. We would do the renewal again in July, but it would only be good for 9 months. So we would currently the fee is based on $78 per month for the year. And within the last 6 months, our current rules allow us to prorate it. We would prorate the entire 9-month period from July 1 to the end of March. That would be 2028 to whatever amount that is for that 9-month period. And then that next renewal period would start in February for the license beginning on April of 2025. So there's 12 months renewal that we're in now. Starting July 1, there would be 9 months, July 1 of 2027, and then back to 12 months in 2028 to change that date, if that makes sense.
Susie Herring for the record. So using that example, listening to what the comment was made before, if they're renewing in July, they could renew for 15 months in July and start like the October. So they could go July, August, September, and they could do October to October as what was mentioned. I mean, it's essentially the same because you're doing 9 months, you do 3 months, and you could just tack it on to the 12. So there'd be a 15-month renewal cost to get them to be current, potentially. I'm just weighing the odds of the suggestion. It still sounds like it could be something doable if that works for the industry.
Question.
Jeremy?
Yes, SEIU would happily support whatever works most efficiently for DPSST and for private security employers. I imagine you've considered this, but just one question, mostly out of curiosity, and in case it's useful. With other kinds of licenses in other industries and in other state agencies, they're on a rolling basis. Had you considered that concept as a way of providing, flexibility for the applicants, and then maybe also a more for DPSST staff, maybe more distributed across the year, having it just be, rolling year to year from the date of approval rather than within a specific window?
So like the private security provider certification and license, where once you apply, that begins once your license or your certification is issued, that begins your 1 year cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah, I want to say that when we had the discussion in the original work group, one of the reasons for having a set timeline for the license was just to provide that stability for the entity, so they would always know that the same time every year, this is the thing that they need to do. It was supposed to help that versus having to remember when you have to do it. So always knowing that you have to do it by a certain date. was an option, but is definitely something that can be discussed.
I can add to that we have companies that have never been licensed. They've provided enough documentation and payment in that to get a temporary. And they will operate until the temporary gets admin termed and then they reapply. And so that's getting addressed later in the rules. And so throughout the entire licensing period, they're not able to meet the requirements. So they're operating on these temporaries. Having a set time allows us to terminate those applications and make them come back through and reapply, rather than continuing this. And you'll see later on when we talk about temporary authorizations and limiting the number of those, also to address that issue. So that's kind of an issue we're able to address with having a fixed timeline for the licensing period.
What other thoughts from the work group members on having a set designated time versus having a whenever you apply is when your year starts? And Tom, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I talked to Michael about that, what he just said, and we'll get to it later on. There is a loophole there that people seem to have found, so I agree with Michael 100% on that we need to set a deadline date.
So far, not necessarily any opposition to a change. Open to discussion on where that shift goes within the year. So we can have some further discussion on that. Really, the things that we had identified going into, as factors for shifting, when shifting it forward, it would have made it easier to understand when a business was in tax compliance. Shifting it earlier also shifts it into the time period when the Department of Revenue is receiving taxes and those types of things. So we didn't know if it would increase the amount of time it took for them to respond to a request for a certificate of compliance. Because it might be within that tax season timeframe. And then it was just the implementation of it and how do we roll out which months and which prorated and which direction it goes into. So we had talked about those things. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you about the rest of the changes within this administrative rule, and we can continue to talk about it collectively. So the next change that you'll see there within the administrative rule is limiting entities to no more than 2 temporary authorization forms within a 1-year licensing period. This ties back into the application process. When an entity applies and they've submitted their materials, if something is deficient or if we're still waiting for that tax compliance, we have that administrative termination process if not everything is completed by a certain period of time. So this would be saying you can't be licensed indefinitely based on a temporary authorization. At some point, you must have met all of the requirements to hold the license. So it's for compliance enforcement. In section 6, the changes there are giving further clarification to when the ownership of an entity changes. In the first administrative rules, we had just captured the sold, but there are other ways that a business can transfer ownership to another individual. which means that it might not exactly be the same entity any longer. So this clarifies that and sets some reporting requirements as well as the requirements for new application. We had one more discussion item for this administrative rule, and that was the concept of applying for more than 1 year at a time. So having a multi-year license, having the option for an entity to apply for a 2-year license, or we could continue and we would discuss how many years you could go up to. So is that something that we should explore and consider as an option, having a multi-year license? Go ahead, Zach.
Sorry, I had to mute myself. Zach Baker for the record. I think there'd be a huge benefit in extending that out. I think as the business world evolves, we keep getting more administrative burdens put on us, both from regulatory departments and taxes and things like that. So I think at minimum, exploring a 2-year option would be good, if not even expanding it out further.
Couldn't tell who came up next. They're numbered on the screen. Tom is second.
So I've got a question on if I sell my business, according to this, we got 10 days to notify, and then the new owner would have to submit basically a new application.
Correct.
Doesn't the entity license belong to the business at that point? Shouldn't it? I guess what I'm asking is, why do we have to get a new one?
Not transferable. And when the ownership changes, it's been in the rule. The change would be, it is based on an incident that happened this last year where currently it says when the business is sold. We did have an incident where a business owner just transferred ownership to one of his employees and said, I'm not the owner of the business anymore. It's that guy now. And I'm just giving him the business. So it didn't fall under the definition of sold. And so that's why we're asking for this rule change, because there's a change in the ownership of the business, but it's not a sale. And currently our rule says sold. But it's been this way since the beginning of the thing, that when it's a change in the financially interested person, a change in the entity representative, that the entity representative, we just need new paperwork. But a change in the financially interested person, you would have to reapply because the license is not transferable.
So I would add that this also ties into the requirement for DPSST to look into the character, competence, and reliability of an applicant before issuing a license. So it would prevent the situation of selling an entity license to an entity that's been denied a license because they didn't meet character, competence, and they didn't meet the standards for licensure. So that is one aspect of it. The new business has a different tax compliance. They also need to be able to demonstrate that they have the general liability insurance and the proof of ability to pay wages and take on all of those responsibilities. So that is the reason for expiring the old license and requiring a new one.
Okay, I understand all that, and I would notify you guys. I was just curious, just because I'm sure that question is going to get asked, or we're going to run into it somewhere.
Of course,
So thank you.
Absolutely. Jason, I think you were next.
Yeah, I had the same question about whether it was going to be transferable or not. And I hear what you're saying about all of that insurance, especially. I didn't know if there was a scenario in which the new ownership was able to check all those boxes without any difficulty, if there was some way to apply that, going forward, but sounds like not.
Okay. Zach?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay. Raul.
Going back to the multi-year license proposal for 2 years, Raul, for the record, I'm sorry. I do agree with Zach. I think is a better option, to have that 2-year, option again for licenses though.
I do want to reiterate that we would not get rid of the 1-year license. That would remain an option to be able to allow entities to choose that based on their financial ability. Because at this particular point, having a 2-year license would not necessarily change the license amount. The individual would be paying for 2 years of licensure at one time.
Yes, Raul, for the record, yes, I agree.
Yep.
There should be the option to pay the current fee, whatever it is for each entity. And there could be an option to pay in full for the 2 years, which in my opinion, at least in my side of the company, probably will, at least gives you those 2 years you already paid. And then you have to worry about, the 2 years later to pay again. But yeah, that option should still be open.
Okay. Zach, your hand did go up.
I think something's going on with the end on my. I apologize about that. Is it going down now if I
It's
click
yeah,
anything?
it's down now. Yeah.
Okay.
No problem.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Tom.
So again, I mean, I agree 100%. Well, I kind of go both ways on this because what I can see, there is some shady companies out there. As you guys know, everybody knows. I'm going to apply for a 2-year license. Next year, I may not get my insurance and stuff like that. So that's something we all need to think about. I can see both beneficial and negative things to both sides of this.
There's a question on the thing about what history they have before we allow a multi-year license. So in the memo, there's a question if to allow the multi-year license, should there be like a history of years in compliance before we allow that? And then what would that number be? Would that be like in the last 2 years, you've been in compliance and you've been licensed, and so now you can do a multi-year one? So that's also in there for discussion.
And I want to say, and you can tell me because you see the documents, Michael, when we receive the documentation of liability insurance and surety bonds, they have an amount of time that's on them as well. So if they are set to expire with any time, or if they're applying for a 2-year license, they'd have to show us that it covers that amount.
So the liability insurance is issued annually with expiration date in a year. And then typically insurance companies will send us the renewed policies in that. The surety bonds are renewed. The bond form itself does not expire, but they are renewed by the bond company. And when the bond company sets to cancel them, they'll send us a notice of cancellation, usually with about a 3-week leeway, saying, hey, by this time, we're going to cancel it if we haven't received payment or something for the bond. So we do get communication from the bond companies about any potential cancellations, and we communicate that with the entity representative.
Thank you. Jeremy, your hand was up.
Yeah, Jeremy Simmer for the record. I think it's important here to sort of thread the needle carefully and to balance what is going to be most efficient and reduce the paperwork and such for the private security entities, but then also meeting the intent of the original legislation, which was to ensure responsibility, as we understand it. It was to ensure that there were responsible companies that are providing security services and to create transparency with the industry. So to make sure that, as Tom mentioned, there are some bad actors, there are some shady characters out there. Not company here, which I know are trustworthy employers, but for that reason, I think I heard Michael refer, or I'm sorry, someone from department staff referring to some kind of good standing, like being good standing. I think that concept is very important before offering a multi-year license. That would be consistent with the way BOLI issues licenses to other types of labor contractors. I mean, we see, even though the industries are quite different, there are, there are comparable licensing requirements for janitorial, for farming, for forestry, for construction, different kinds of companies that provide services in a comparable manner to security. I think you have to have good standing. It does allow for multiple years, but those disclosures also have to be made on an annual basis. And I would name in particular, in addition to tax compliance, I think there's also the question of the work locations. I think that some of the legislative intent was to make sure that if there is a bad actor employer, and if an employee feels that their rights are not being respected, or the employer is not complying with the law, that they should be able to find their coworkers and have conversations. They should be able to report things to DPSST or OSHA or BOLI. They should be able to have an advocate come in on their behalf and be able to identify where is this company and how, where does this company have operations, and who can we talk to sort of assess, is this company in compliance or not in compliance with the law in other work locations. So that list of work locations, I think, among other types of disclosures, would be important to be annual, even if someone was given a 2-year or 4-year or a multi-year license. And all that would be consistent with how it works with the other licenses at BOLI.
Thank you. So further discussion with Raul?
Yes, in regards to the multi-year license, I agree there should be some conditions, before these are even an option. Considering that some companies should not have any outstanding violations, any unpaid penalties, and they should have good compliance history for previous licensing periods. I think if you guys put something like that, it provides not only an option to whoever has this, and allows you also to weed out, like those bad performers that you guys are mentioning as well.
Thank you. In summary, I hear support for having an option for a multi-year license, that there should be qualification for that. So perhaps having demonstrated 2 years of your application and your compliance. So DPSST would have processed 2 years of CCR investigations and issued the license. That the individual who's applying for the multi-year license would not have any outstanding violations, and that in order to qualify for a multi-year license, there should be still annual reporting requirements, and we would have to outline which of those things would have to be included. That's kind of the summary of the collective comments. Any additions or any concerns with any of those? Already got some thumbs up. Okay.
I think I would like to throw in addition to no violations and no unpaid penalties, no admin terms of applications in the last 2 years.
No admin terms.
Right.
We have to go to the budget meeting. Yep. You good? Good. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Jen, this is Carissa. For the record, I just have a question. Are we talking just compliance with Division 59, or are we talking about Division 60 as well?
I believe that I was initially talking about your entity license,
Ahead.
but let's have some discussion.
So it's in here later, Carissa, to add in Division 60 issues, major issues, like employing uncertified staff and adding those into the Division 59. It's further down here. It's within there. So if all of this goes through, it would include that within the 59 rules as well. Those concerns that we have with the employers being things like employing uncertified staff, not having an executive manager, paying staff as contractors when they're not licensed as executive managers, those sort of things that we're seeing happening in the industry for the bad actors.
So,
Okay.
so in essence, by adding those requirements to be in compliance with Division 60, it means that the entity meets the CCR, and then because they meet CCR, we are able to issue a license. But still, I definitely want to have comments from the members. And Tom, go ahead.
I think that they ought to be in full compliance with both 59 and 60 to be able to be eligible to even get a license, period. Let it, whether it be 1 year or 2 year or whatever.
Right. Any other comments on the multi-year license? Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, maybe this is a silly question, but is it going to have any impact, positive or negative, on like the speed at which things are processed there at DPSST? Not that I'm aware that there's been an issue, but if there's this mad rush of 2-year licenses in the first year, is that going to bog anything down on your side?
The only thing that would change would be the expiration date of the license, and the processing would be exactly the same.
Okay. So I think that covers everything that we had identified as far as draft changes to Rule 40 and the period of licensure, and the discussion points that we had on whether or not to change the dates of the licensing period and what to do about multi-year license. My thoughts at this point would be to take your comments and feedback, work them into the draft rule changes, and kind of recap back on those discussions in the next meeting to show what it would all look like on paper. So is there a strong opinion on one way or another on which direction to shift the licensing period? Earlier in the year versus later in the year? Okay. All right. Well, if anything pops up for you later in the discussion, feel free to bring us back to it. Okay. Where are we now? The next rule is Rule 50, the licensing exam. So per the enabling statutes, the entity has to pass an exam. The exam is specific to testing the applicant's knowledge of the private security entity responsibility with regard to preventing sexual harassment, sexual assault, and discrimination in the workplace. So we've got the changes there that just change how we talk about a licensure, licensing. We've got those. But what you'll see there in the changes where we're replacing 2 and 3 with new information, right now, as it was established, you would have to complete that exam every time you apply. So sometimes it is every year when you're applying. For some individuals, it's been every time they've applied if their temporary authorization expired and they had to reapply, or if they were administratively terminated. So at this particular point, it's an exam that is static. It hasn't changed since it was adopted. So you would have the same person taking the same test every time without any changes. So this proposes an option whereby if the applicant and the entity representative is the same entity representative that's representing the company, the entity, then they wouldn't have to take it upon renewal unless the exam changed, in which case they would have to, we would set up a way that in the renewing process, they would have to retake the exam. And also still maintaining that if the entity changes who their entity representative is, that person has to take the exam as well. So happy to hear some questions and comments on those changes. And Tom, you have your hand up, so let's start with you.
So you're saying basically, as a business owner, I only have to take it one time when I originally get it? Is that what you're stating, or?
That's what the draft is. So until it is changed.
So let's see. So
Yeah.
the MOU between DPSST and BOLI for the training is for an annual review. If there's a change in law or updates to changes, if that happens, then there'll be a change in the training that's provided, and then we'll notify entity representatives, hey, on this renewal, you're going to have to take the exam again because there's been a change. If there's no change that's made to the training, then they would not need to retake the exam for the renewal until such time that there's a change in those laws or the training.
Okay, so I guess, and I'd still like to see us take that training. I just don't think that it's necessary every year per se. If you got a 2-year, why don't we just do it every 2 years minimum for everybody or something like that?
Okay. Raul, your hand was up next.
Yes, Raul, for the record. So in my case, as an alarm monitor instructor, I also get to take the same test every 2 years. So in that case, going with Tom, I agree with that part, if you can take it every 2 years. However, everything that you mentioned at the beginning, like sexual harassment, all that type of training is state related as well. We take multi-state training in regards to those things. So those things should continue to happen per company, and then if you guys have any other training in regards to that, yeah, offer it to us as well. Especially something changes the state regulations, then we can also continue to take that. I think the 2 years will be great because I'm already doing that and it works fine for me. So I think it will be probably beneficial unless it's something, that has to do with regulations in regards to weapons, crowd control and things that you may change in the state as well.
Yeah. This is a very limited scope of questions that are specifically on an entity's responsibility with, but it's not necessarily linked to the training requirements that you all have as businesses, and later there's the delivery of the workplace training to individuals. It doesn't change any of that. This is just specifically the test that you take in order to get a license. And it's like, again, right now it's static, but let's keep the conversation going. Jeremy, you had your hand up next.
Jeremy Simmer, for the record. Yeah, I would agree with what I understand Tom and Raul to be saying, is that every 2 year would be reasonable. I do have a concern with the idea of one and done until a possible change, because these are the sorts of things, sexual harassment and discrimination is a serious problem and is the sort of thing that can just be kind of swept under the rug. And so I think the legislative intent of this law was in large part to really address that problem within the industry. We've heard from multiple private security professionals in multiple employers that they're not actually getting trained. This is a different part of the law and rules, but they're not getting the training as required. And so my concern is that if you don't have the leadership of a company being reminded about this on a periodic basis, like every 2 years, and being held accountable for knowing that these requirements exist. I think just sort of one and done, and theoretically someone could pass once and be the primary contact for 15 years and never have to do it again. I don't think that'd be appropriate. So I think something more like a every 2 years would be would strike the balance.
Okay. Thank you. Looking to see who's next. Looks like Tom.
So I agree 100% what Jeremy just said. I've asked this before, why can't that training for the employees be included in their refresher or their first time in the actual training class? Then we know everybody has taken it at least every year, every 2 years.
Yeah. So we can I'll have to dig out the history on that, but that one is what you're talking about is the workplace training that the entity is required to make sure that their employees have. And you're
Yes.
talking about having that incorporated into the training that they take in order to get their provider, the professional certification. So I'm going to put a
And I know
pin.
this isn't the right group for that, but I mean,
Yes.
that's just something we can
Yeah.
look at somewhere
Right.
else down the road.
Okay.
So I don't know if you remember or not, Tom, we discussed this when we first created the rules. The roadblock to that is the legislation is a requirement on the employer, and for the employer to provide these things, rather than having them pass the buck to a trainer. And because they specifically in the legislation put that the training had to be provided through BOLI, with a BOLI training. And I know we've created the video and it's all there and that, but the requirement is it's on the business, to provide. And, there's nothing that allows that to be transferred to a trainer. The requirement and the necessity is on the business to make sure it's done. Now, if they want to do it through their in-house trainer and that's fine. But it's the requirement and the expectation is on the business to make sure that training is provided.
Yeah, I remember all that and I totally understand that, but I was just trying to simplify it for everybody. I mean, if you hire somebody that has certification, if we implemented this now, you would know that they had that training. That's just the way that I was trying to simplify it for everybody.
Yeah. I've written it down. We can have some more discussion on it whenever we get to workplace training, but like Michael was saying, it's outlined right now in statute as the entity's responsibility, and it would take a statutory change for us to be able to shift it into the provider. And I think part of the concern on that might be the financial responsibility. Who bears the financial responsibility for that training? Even though to the best of our ability, we've made it something that's accessible without cost. But okay, so I'm going to stop rambling there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's very, it makes you start to think about things again. Yeah. So every discussion is welcome. Let's see who else has their hand up.
Zach
Baker for the record. I was going to actually advocate kind of an opposing opinion, which is the one and done. Last time I took the test, I didn't have to use the reading materials and got 100%. I don't think they're very sophisticated, theories as far as on the HR end, and most of us are applying those every day, those concepts. So it's not really new information. So I just wanted to put that out there that I think it would be good to do a one and done. I think every business owner should be applying those concepts every day. And unless there's a change, it just seems kind of unnecessary to take it every year.
Thank you. We have a mix of feedback and discussion on that, but some opening and support to finding a window in which it doesn't have to be completed every year for every application. We will, we'll reflect on the conversation and see what we can put together and bring back in draft rule change format.
Jen, this is Carissa
Yep.
for the record.
Yep.
Could I just throw something out there, if you will,
Of course.
to try to mirror or bridge the gap? Maybe instead of having them take the test every 2 years and the training, there's, you know, like Zach mentioned, that it doesn't change. If it doesn't change, what's the point of redoing it? Maybe they just sign an affidavit that says, you know, I agree that I do all these things. I'm aware of the things. So that way we have that accountability that they're still reminded, they're still made aware of, they're still held accountable for that actions without having to take a test or a training that's not changed or different. So just an idea, just throwing it out there.
Thoughts?
I don't know how with the
Sure.
statute.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Jeremy Simmer for the record. I think I want to think about this a bit more, but Carissa, your idea is an interesting one. I think the principle here behind the law and behind the training and the examination is to make sure that employers know the concepts and are employing the concepts like Zach referred to. If there were such an affidavit as you suggested, Carissa, and as long as, you know, especially if there's like multiple sort of you know, initials for different sections of what's included, so there's real clarity of people saying, yes, I've done this, yes, I've done this, yes, you know, I do this, I'm aware of this. Then if you are a responsible business owner and you're actually doing those things, great, makes it easier for you. If you're not actually a responsible business owner and not actually complying with the law, such as with the required trainings to prevent sexual harassment, discrimination, etc., and if you actually sign that affidavit saying, yeah, I'm doing this, and you're not doing it, as I understand it, that would be one more piece of evidence in terms of character, competence, and reliability. If you provide false information to the department, that could be grounds for, you know, for holding a business owner accountable. As I understand it, up to including denying them a license, etc. You know, false information would be a lie, which would be illegal. So I think that SEIU could get behind that sort of thing. That's a compromise along the lines of what Carissa said, as long as there's some tool to make sure that every business owner is being reminded and held to account on those concepts.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Any other thoughts or discussion before we take a look at the next?
Well, I just have a discussion issue. Are we talking about making this across the board for all applicants for whether they do a 1-year or 2-year license? And the reason I ask is because specifically within the statute in 900, it says the department needs to, as part of the application packet, have the license examination as required by 801 or 181A 904, which talks about the test and administering the test for an applicant. Can we by rule change that if it's in the statute to an affidavit if the statute requires a test? I could see changing it to say, hey, the license is good for 2 years now, so you don't need to take it because you're not applying for 2 years. Or even if we do 3 years, you wouldn't need to take it. But I think I know we have leeway in 904 to make rules for it, but if it specifically states in the statute that license examination is required as part of the license applicant process, can we change that?
Sure, I haven't found it in 900. Where are you looking in 900?
904B.
Or B? That's
About license fees though.
fees. That's for setting the fees, yeah. So in 181A 904, it states that DPSST may not issue a license to operate as an entity until the applicant for such license has successfully passed a qualifying exam designated to test the applicant's knowledge of the entity's responsibility to prevent sexual harassment, sexual assault, and discrimination in the workplace. And so with that, and the idea of not taking it every year or with every application per se, would follow along a similar interpretation that we have in our private investigator licensure program, where again, that is a static examination that doesn't change from year to year. So we have a record that they have passed because they've submitted with their first application the record that they passed and met that requirement, and that becomes part of their record until their license expires and is no longer active. So if they had to reapply after something is expired, we'd have to determine whether or not they still meet those requirements by whether or not we still have record of completion. So that's how we would be able to change that not change, but interpret that requirement of may not issue a license to operate until they've successfully passed, because we have the first record of successful passage. So that is an interpretation. But through the discussions, we've still heard that there's value in ensuring that it's been taken like at least every other year has been the larger part of consensus so far. What other statements, questions from the work group? Zach, your hand's up. No, okay, no problem. Others, thoughts? Okay. All right. So we will see what we can do to look at putting in the two. Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
Before I would like to review the actual content of the examination and of you know, if there were to be any kind of affidavit, I still think I lean towards towards the concept that came up from Tom and Raul about every 2 years. But if we were to move towards this affidavit, I would want to make sure that there was a clear comparison of what's in the exam and what's in the affidavit to make sure that it's really fitting the bill.
Okay. Sorry, just making notes. Okay. Everyone's still doing okay? All right. We have about 40 more minutes that we can talk. Let's see. Rule 60 is the license for the application for the license. What we have outlined as some suggested clarifying changes in this one. Again, that terminology of licensure. We did a little bit of reorganization to refer to the application as a packet. So the packet would include the application form and the fees. So where that fee is listed up in the body of part 2, we've just, for clarification, made it one of the listed items in the ABCD. The change there in the bold part of D, where it says proof of compliance with business tax requirements as defined by a rule, is replacing the part that's marked out in section C We were just hoping to provide some additional clarification on that proof of compliance by adopting a rule, just like there's a rule for the proof of liability insurance and the proof of ability to pay wages. So we're gonna get to that rule and the draft rule language for that eventually. So right now it's just a structural change. The change to D is just changing how we're requesting that same completion certificate for the license exam. So it's just really wording on that one. In G, the change there is trying to simplify. Right now, it's a copy and paste of the statutory language that's outlining whether or not a person has ever been denied a certificate or license under the statute within the preceding 3 years. And we just thought that at this point, we would be able to summarize that in the condensed language that's provided there as an example. Not changing any of the intent or the interpretation, but just hoping to provide it in a more simple statement for the reader. In H, we've added the link to the definition of work location or locations as it's defined in the definitions rule, just as a pointer there, so that when folks are looking to see what they have to submit and they're wondering what it means for work or work locations, sometimes we find that it's helpful to have that pointer back to where they can find the definition. So that is what has been included there in H and I. And then you'll see the changes to the date for the application for renewal, as we've talked about in the previous rule, changing the timeline in which the license is issued. And so whatever changes we make to that rule would be complementarily reflected here as well. But so this would be illustrating that if we changed it to the April 1st through March 31st, those changes would reflect that. Any questions on application material requirements? The rest of the rule goes on to talk about the administrative termination process when an application has never been completed, how we issue notices of deficiencies and give them timelines in which to comply. And that there's always the option to withdraw your application for a license, and that falsification of any information can result in civil penalties or denial or revocation. Just kind of the overview of the rule in its entirety. Not seeing any questions or concerns there. Oh, go ahead, Raul.
Yeah, just Raul for the record. No objections, nothing like that, no observations or concerns. Pretty much straightforward, makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next, Rule 70 outlines the fees and the payment options requirements. It's kind of a standard rule there. Recommended changes. Okay, just reading through notes here. So again, it has that example of the date change if we shift the licensing period. The change to the language in section 2 is just to be able to clarify and provide a better way of stating how we were prorating. So when we first initially set up the entity license, we were adopting rules that went into effect in January for a licensing period that would run from July to June of the next year. So we had a mid period from January to July of the first year of 2024. So we were setting up a way to prorate so that if a person applied, they didn't have to turn around in 6 months and reapply. They could apply all at once for that 6-month period and the full first years, and we would prorate the amounts of the license fee. So that was how we incorporated that. But now we're looking at, okay, we're doing ongoing, new businesses come into the program. We want to ensure that our language clearly allows us to say, okay, you're a new applicant, you just started your business, but it's halfway through the licensing period, so you're prorated for 6 months and then can reapply during that time period. So just really for us clarifying language, but if you see questions or concerns about it, let us know. Any other discussion on the draft changes or anything about the fee and payment rule? Let me check here. There was a discussion item. This is a big discussion item. Discussion item number 3 in your memo on page 5. The current licensing fee is the same for all entities, no matter what the size of the business or whether it's located within Oregon or out of state. And through the process, the initial adoption and through the increased discussions and those types of things, DPSST has received feedback asking the agency to look at other options, including fee structures that would be based on a business's size or a business's location. So we wanted to just kind of open that up for discussion and feedback. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I was looking at this while you were on the last section there. Just kind of had some thoughts on it. And sorry, Zach, for the record. I think it's $1,000 right now or somewhere close to that. It doesn't feel like a very prohibitive amount on an annual basis for a company. And I was thinking about different ways that you would scale business size. It seems a little convoluted because, there's revenue, there's profit, there's W-2 employees, which could be twice your actual employee size. And thinking about the different industries that it would impact. If you had somewhere like crowd management, which has a lot of temp employees, and you do it based off employee size, they might be paying an inflated, entity license because they have that many employees. And then if you think about national vendors like a Securitas or something like that, do you just take their state employees if you're going based off employee size? Do you take their 2 million national employees? Just seems like too convoluted to try to break it up by business size when I don't really think the cost is very prohibitive.
Other discussion, feedback? Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, Jason Bledsoe for the record. From a historical perspective, has DPSST ever looked at a resident or non-residence fee, not unlike a hunting license or, something like that? Have you guys ever looked at that as a means to support program costs or something to that effect when the state budget tightens its belt?
Yeah, we haven't considered it in the past. I think we arrived at the original determination that it was the same fee for all businesses, no matter what, because the majority of our businesses were small businesses. We only have a handful that are those larger corporations, but they do take a lot of staff time. As far as the processing and the compliance and the ongoing the efforts. So is it a matter of how much time does it take to process applications? Or so really, because the majority of individuals were small businesses, there was no way to create a balance in. I know your question was in-state, out of state, but I think I'm going back to the full history. And it was that you could not, that we just didn't find a way at that time to be able to balance those buckets by having a higher fee amount for one group of individuals when the majority of your applicants were this other one. It never created a balance. I don't know enough about the tracking of in-state or out-state. You can answer that one. Okay.
So we have been asked to track whether a business is registered as a foreign business registered with the Secretary of State's office, or if it's registered as domestic. And we do track that. We have that information. So we would be able to determine if a company is a foreign company operating within the state or if it's registered as a domestic. What I'm seeing though is there are companies that will register, I mean, out of Texas that will register as domestic LLCs with the Secretary of State's office. Even though they're from Texas, they'll set up a home office in Portland and say, yeah, we're registering as a domestic LLC. So we could implement an out-of-state charge, but I think that would just cause those companies to change their registrations because that's how we're tracking is. How are they registered through the Secretary of State's office for that?
Thank you.
Zach?
Yeah, Zach, for the record. I was just gonna clarify. I was just wondering what demographic of businesses were making, those complaints to you guys. Was it smaller businesses that were kind of bringing it forward?
And I wouldn't say it's a complaint necessarily as much as just trying to explore all of the options when we're talking about the fee and just recognizing small businesses, recognizing Oregon businesses. It's been feedback and discussion. Like, are there other ways to approach a fee structure? As it's been mentioned at the beginning, it's challenging. It's challenging to figure out different ways to
Have you guys
assess.
thought about how you would assess the size of a company, or is that kind of what this is for?
It's an open discussion on whether or not it's even something to entertain. Yeah.
What we initially did is we based it off the number of private security providers they listed as they employed on the application, and whether to break it down by that. What we found was we have very few companies with like over 200 employees. The vast majority of security companies have 20 or fewer employees within the state. So to break out a fee amount for large companies, it would only affect a handful of companies. The vast majority of them, it wouldn't affect at all. So there really wouldn't be a whole lot of change because of that.
Tom?
So are we talking full-time employee? Like, I mean, this month I've got 100 and something employees this month. 2 months from now, I'm gonna have 40. 2 months after that, it'll be down to 20. Then there's spikes and drops in it. So what are we talking here?
Right now, we're just talking about, is there value to the discussion? Is there value to exploring further whether or not to have a fee structure that looks at the size of a business? We'd have to determine what those criteria are, but is there value, or should it just stay as it is? Same license fee for every entity, no matter what.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. If it's gonna make my fees go up, I want to leave it alone. And then most companies are gonna say that. So,
Right.
but that's the thing we got to look at too. What are we considering if we're gonna do it that way? What are we considering? Is it gonna be part-time, full-time? I mean, I got it like last week. I had 90 something employees last week. I'm back down to my normal this week.
We've always told applicants to report a snapshot in time of what they have at the time they apply.
Yes.
And it's going to change, obviously, because if we go from application that comes in May or June versus an application that comes in February, March, those numbers are going to be drastically different based on the industry and, when they're ramping up staffing to do things. So.
Okay.
Raul, your hand was up next.
Yes, Raul, for the record. So my only thing, and this is talking about the out-of-state companies. I'm in New York. The only thing, like if there's an increase or anything, a change in the fees or something like that, could affect out-of-state companies. I'm not talking about out-of-state, out-of-the-country companies that offer services here, but out-of-state companies will have less chances to compete with local companies. And I understand as well, that's something that for the state will benefit the local companies as well. But maybe like, Tom was saying, maybe keeping the fees as they are, it will be beneficial at this time. I don't think anybody wants to see their fees going up. So that would be my only comment in regards to that.
Thank you. Zach, your hand's still up, so I don't know if you have another comment or it's just hanging out there.
I don't, and I'm not even touching it, and it just keeps triggering. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Maybe I'll just raise my hand in real time.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right, Jason.
Yeah, maybe a new guy question here. I apologize, but what's the percentage of out-of-state companies versus in-state security companies? I don't know if Michael knows that off the top of his head.
I mean, it would be a ballpark figure. I would say probably somewhere around 35 to 40%. But you've got different kinds of companies as well. I mean, you look at Raoul's companies, they're alarm monitors. We've got alarm monitor companies from other countries, but we have from New York to Florida to Texas to Oklahoma, and they're all monitoring alarms in Oregon. And so those are different than ones that are providing physical security. And so you have that array as well that you're looking at. So.
Okay, great point. I hadn't thought about that. Thank you.
This is Carissa again for the record. Just thinking devil's advocate and our bad apples, if you will. If we went off of a employee at the time of application, could they not wait until they had only 10 employees on staff to apply to then get that lower rate? They're gonna, if we give them a loophole, they're gonna find it. They're gonna use it, and they're gonna do what they want with it.
Yeah, I think when Susie had heard from other states or looked at other states, and she's not here to be able to speak to it, but I think that the criteria that when states employed a different fee structure, and they were looking at it, it would have been based on more financials of the company than the number of employees. But again, that's also still a hard thing to track. Tom?
So do we need to look at maybe creating something to separate it from like Raul's business, alarm monitors? If they're exempt from this part of this, here's your fee versus actual physical security. Some sort of structure like that. Is that something we need to consider?
Like based on security type?
Yeah.
Well, then would you charge more for a company that provides armed security versus unarmed? Because I know that's a big hurdle when it comes to the insurance and the other requirements of the licensing. Their cost to get those things is more based on the type of things that they're doing. So, I mean, how far do we go with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, as we all know, insurance is becoming harder and harder to get, whether you're armed, unarmed, anything right now. If it says security, it's getting tough. So it was just an option I was throwing out. I don't know, just trying to make it fair for people to think about or whatever.
So far from the discussion, it sounds like everyone still kind of leans towards the current one fee for all is still the most equitable way to apply it. I feel like that's the interpretation that I'm walking away from with the discussion. I want to confirm that with you all. Okay. Because I don't want to assume. I saw several thumbs up and head nods. Raul, you did raise your hand, so if you want to
Correct. Yeah, in regards to the fees, I think it will be fine because even if we separate, there's always going to be a higher fee or a lower fee. Everybody's always going to have a fee. As alarm monitoring, we're nationwide, and like there's so many other licenses, insurance that we have to go per state. So each state's always going to be different. So keeping the fees as they are probably for now, it will be beneficial to maintain, every other business that we have nationwide as well.
Thank you. Jeremy, your hand went up? No? Okay. All right. So general consensus, maintain the fee structure as it is, same fee for all applicants. Okay. All right. We have almost 15 minutes left. The next administrative rule is number 80, character, competence, and reliability. If you're looking at attachment A, it's page 12. When we look at the draft changes that are within this, what you'll see is that we have added 2 more components to character, competence, and reliability. These 2 components are also going to be mirrored in the compliance rule for civil penalties. We'll also see reference to it in the denial revocation standards, but really capturing failure to pay civil penalties or adhere to the payment plan that you agreed to for your civil penalties or any other penalties that were assessed. So you're basically still within non-compliance. And then the other big one that we were talking about earlier is not being in compliance with Division 60. And the entity is assigning individuals to perform private security services who don't have their private security professional certification or temporary work permit. So that non-compliance with assigning individuals to work who haven't been certified. So that's what we're proposing adding to the character, competence, and reliability. But going back to like more broadly, what is the character, competence, and reliability? Again, DPSST is required to look at character, competence, and reliability of an applicant. And we used this rule to basically kind of give an outline of how DPSST defines that. And so that's where all of the other things are enumerated in section 3, where it says evidence of unsatisfactory, what we call CCR, and then it lists all of those different things. The failure to comply with business tax requirements, failure to provide forms and maintain liability insurance and provide the professional workplace. So really outlining all of those really critical things that are part of the licensure requirements.
Can I speak to this?
Sure, please go ahead.
For section M, just so the members are aware, Division 60 and Division 59 are handled completely different when it comes to compliance. Division 60 violations go through the policy committee, and then once they vote on it, it goes to the board. Division 59 violations go directly to the board. Most companies that I run into that have issues bump into the issue of having uncertified staff as well. So I'm having to do twice the work and go through a different procedure to handle one company's issues. And this would allow these issues to be handled directly within Division 59 and go straight to the board and streamline things, I guess, dealing with bad businesses out there handling things. So that's why we've added M to the Division 60 rule requirements. Because I run into that quite a bit with bad companies.
Go ahead.
It's like we talked about before. I think this stuff all ought to fall under 59 and 60 combined. That would simplify what Michael just said. Carissa said it too. It's let's just make it all fall under both statutes on this.
Thank you. So any discussion at all on any part of character, competence, or liability and the proposed additions or any of the existing requirements? I'll go ahead, Jeremy.
Jeremy Simmer for the record. SEIU supports those changes. They make sense and they're an important part of holding employers accountable. And also, I have a suggestion for something else to consider as an addition. One of our concerns is when responsible business owners are having to compete against low road contractors that are not following the law and then gain an unfair advantage. Particularly, I'm thinking about wage theft, misclassification of workers as independent contractors when they're not legitimately independent contractors. These different ways that, irresponsible employers can violate the law and violate the rights of workers in order to save a buck. And that puts responsible employers at an unfair advantage. So I would recommend the consideration of adding a section saying that compliance with employment rules that are already reflected in there's OAR rule 160, which comes later, the statement of employee rights and responsibility, rights and remedies. That's, it says, it names a number of employment laws, including wage and hour and OSHA and other things. And so if you have a company that has a pattern of cheating workers from their wages, not complying with OSHA standards, putting workers, safety and health at risk, doing all the sorts of things that responsible employers don't do. I think I would recommend that be incorporated as something that that the department would have the option to consider in doing an overall assessment of character, competence, reliability. I'm not suggesting at all that you forget to, someone's late on payroll once, or a couple of times, and then DPSST throws the book at them. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, if you have a bad actor company that has a pattern of really, trying to find some market advantage by cheating their workers as a business model, that's something that DPSST should have in the rules to be able to say, take that in consideration. So just to summarize and specify, under Rule 160, it names a bunch of employment rules. Right. I would say add reference to that and say if there are violations of these laws, those could be considered.
Thank you.
Jennifer.
Uh-huh.
So Michael, for the record, are we addressing that issue with the contracting unlicensed DMs? Can we put that in later here?
Well, I don't know if that necessarily.
Because that's how we run into that issue. We run into the issue of cash payments or lack of payments because they're bringing staff on and just paying cash, and that when these staff aren't certified as or not licensed as executive managers, which is a violation of a Division 60 rule. And we've gone after companies for that, but I think later in the rule change here, we have that addressed, that we're directly holding the businesses accountable for employing contract employees, or basically 1099s when those employees aren't licensed as executive managers. Because that's, like you said, Jeremy, it's a big issue when companies are just undercutting other companies because they're paying super low cash wages and not doing the licensing or certification that they have to. And so it is in here to address that specific issue. Not so much the wage claim sub, but undercutting and doing cash payments. And that is something that we're addressing later on here, right?
We do address that component of making the tie to the Division 60 requirement that the individual certified professional in Division 60 can't independently contract to provide private security services unless they also have an executive manager license. So there is a later tie-in that says you can't do this for the business entity, but Jeremy is pointing to the overall requirements to be in compliance with employer law, and enumerating that in character, competence, and reliability. And I can look into that and see about draft language, or see if it falls already under the interpretation of the rules. So we can definitely research that and look into it and circle back to it in the next meeting as a suggested add. Yep. Any other discussion on existing or proposed itemization of character, competence, and reliability? To knock off a couple more because they're quick ones. So the next rule is Rule 90, private security equipment, vehicles, uniforms, and titles. This rule prohibits private security entities or their employers from using equipment, vehicles, uniforms, badges, or job titles that suggest they're affiliated with law enforcement or any public safety agency. This rule has a matching counterpart within Division 60. It's 259-060-012. It applies the same standards to the individuals who are certified or licensed as providers. These are companion rules. They exist for ensuring consistency and compliance across both divisions. And we don't have any recommended changes, but we just wanted to provide the rule for you there and acknowledge no changes. Always happy to answer questions about what a rule is or what it's requiring, so don't hesitate to ask those questions. I'll do the same thing for 95, prohibited business names, prohibited entity names. This also comes to us as a prohibition from Oregon revised statutes. The rule prohibits, based on statute, use of a business name that suggests the entity is part of or officially connected to a public safety or law enforcement agency. The statute does have a date that says that if that entity existed before 2016 and they haven't changed ownership, and they get to keep their name. Again, we have a counterpart rule in Division 60. They're companion rules for consistent compliance across both rule divisions, and we didn't have any recommended changes there. Okay. I'll go ahead and start Rule 100 because it begins to tie into what Michael was just trying to explain about that prohibiting entities from just certain employment practices whenever it comes to hiring their providers. Okay, so what we currently have is Rule 100, which is designation of the executive manager. By statute, every entity has to have a designated executive manager. And so that outlines the requirement for that. And so the proposed changes there still maintain that requirement to designate an executive manager, but we've expanded or are proposing, for consideration and discussion, expanding it to incorporate requirements to be in compliance with all of Division 60, the private security provider. So again, Section 1, very much the same as what's up in the existing rule that was shown at the top of the page, the requirement to designate an executive manager. 2, tying in that private security entities are prohibited from assigning a person to perform private security services unless certified as a professional. And 3, private security entities may employ private security professionals to perform private security services. However, in accordance with Rule 259-060-0015, entities are prohibited from contracting a private security professional to provide private security services unless that professional is also licensed as an executive manager. And so this is what Michael was explaining and referring to as that employing, where the entity is in compliance with all of the employment laws versus just tapping someone, bringing them in, paying them cash, doing it as a contract to just kind of circumvent some of the requirements. So it ties into several of the statements that you all have made in conversations that you've had along the way with requiring the entities to be in compliance with Division 60 as well. What kind of questions or comments or concerns in the draft language for 100? Jeremy?
Yeah. Generally, I mean, if as I understand the intent, I think this is good to make sure that there's not that kind of misclassification and using 1099 independent contractors when legally they really should be employees. One concern is that I'm just looking for loopholes, that a dishonest employer might use. What could someone find people who have executive manager certifications, but then, and under this rule, then employ them to actually just do regular private security professional work? I don't think, I think that would be sort of a loophole that would violate the spirit of what you're getting at here. But it looks like, do I explain myself? Does that make sense what I'm saying? What my concern is?
Yeah, but I think it already exists in that as long as the person has both their private security professional certification and their executive manager license, there's that contract language. Yeah. Thank you,
Well, I
Jason.
see people are jumping off, and we're getting very close to 4. So
Yeah.
maybe we could pick this up next time. But I do have a follow-up comment about that when time allows.
Okay.
Should I still
Yes.
speak to? Okay.
Well, are you okay with?
Yeah, sure, gladly.
Okay.
So if someone is providing executive manager services,
Mhm.
then I can see how that makes sense to be contracted rather than employed as an employee. But are you suggesting that it would be okay with the department if someone, say I have an executive manager license, and I know 5 or 10 other people who have executive manager licenses, and we all just get contracted and assigned to do regular private security activity that has nothing to do with executive management. There's no management involved. I'm just providing services. Is that okay? Because it doesn't sound right to me, but I'm wondering if that's allowed.
So what the rule says is if they're going to contract their services, they have to be licensed as an executive manager. So they're already certified as, say, an unarmed professional. But they can't contract their services for cash pay unless they have also an executive manager license. So there are companies that are doing the contract model that you're talking about. And they were using that as kind of a way to get around the entity requirements. But what we did was we told them, no, it doesn't matter how you employ them. We use the definition of employee in the Webster's dictionary. So whether they're contract employees or they're direct employees, you're employing them and you are required to be licensed as an entity. And I think maybe that's what you're thinking about as far as because to be able to contract each one of those individuals would have to have an executive manager license, which is an extra thing on top of their certification. A lot of companies are just taking people that are certified as an unarmed professional and throwing them out in the field and just paying them cash. And that's an issue because those people aren't licensed as executive managers. They're not legally allowed to contract their services. They have to be picked up as W-2 employees.
I want to recognize that it's time. If we need to put a pin in it, we can, but I also don't want to lose your thoughts. Raul and Tom both also have their hand up. So if you want to put something on the record, we can.
Sure. Raul, for the record, just very quickly, that rule is fine for me, you know, to have an executive manager. I think it creates the accountability as well of who the DPS ST is going to contact for any issues that could arrive from, you know, licenses and all that type of stuff. And I think is good what you're proposing right there.
Thank you. And Tom?
I'm gonna make it quick. I'm sure Michael and Chris is both seeing this out in the event world. I know I am. There seems to be a handful of companies out there, the bad apples, that they can't get their entity license, so they are contracting the EM from wherever to come in, supply the workers to do the work. So they're just finding loopholes around everything, basically, or trying to find loopholes. So that's something we need to think about as we're rewriting this rule.
Okay. All right. So we have several thoughts in that current discussion that we are going to put in our parking lot to pick up when we meet again. And I have on our agenda, our next meeting is Tuesday, August 11th at 2 o'clock again. So I will see you all then. Thank you very, very much for your time this afternoon. We've made a lot of great progress.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Very, very
Thank
productive
you,
meeting.
everybody. Nice to meet you all.
Thank everybody. Bye.